Hello guys, tuning today we're going to be listening about bees at our public library. So I go and look at this video. I hope you guys will like it.
Yours, but mine were much later in their
Just
production.
about a week and a half ago, we just pulled off a bunch of supers.
Yeah. Ours too.
We got like in the way of the slides. Okay, January and February. What's happening inside the hive? The bees keep their winter cluster intact, except on the occasional sunny days in the 50s and above when the bees can fly. The queen begins to lay her eggs and the brood rearing begins in the largest, healthiest hives. Okay, this is a cluster right here. This is a cluster where the hive has been opened up, and you can see how it lays on the frames of the beehive. And this is one where all of the frames have been separated, so you can kind of see how they stay grouped together. They all cluster together in a little ball. Kentucky often gets a sharp cold spell in January. Cold weather will not hurt the bees if they are ready for it. With a good cluster size, plenty of the stored honey and the mites and nosema disease keep the mites and the nosema disease under control. It's not too surprising since hives are well adapted to overwinter successfully in northern Canada. At Kentucky State University, we have measured beehive cluster temperatures at about 80 degrees or 90 degrees on a snowy January day. And this diagram here shows generally how the cluster will be heated in the center. And the cluster can be like over here or down here. It doesn't always have to be at the top. They're just showing it right there. This is a thermal picture of a beehive, and you can see that the cluster is probably closer to this side right here. And this one right here is a top bar, and you can see that the cluster is right here, where the heat's coming from here. So
How many people have more than one hive? Do you push them together in the winter?
Move them actually.
Yeah, like, are they close together?
No, I don't move them, but they're about, like maybe a foot for two of them, and then I have maybe 2 feet, and then two more and a foot together.
I only asked this year, we pushed ours more together because they're almost always in pairs. And what I noticed is when I inspected, like this picture right here, they were on the side next to the other because they're sharing that heat. So it's just like Jamie's picture is, if that's what they want, if you can move them together, then they share that heat of each other. And it is really neat how, it hasn't even gotten that cold, but they're already in a cluster in that zone. So it's really interesting.
And another thing that we'll get into later on is when we talk about the apiaries is windbreaks and the design of your apiary. So windbreaks can be anything. It can be a fence with some gardening mesh on it, or hay bales, or shrubbery.
Insulation, some kind of that foam board.
Right.
It's a good one.
So the beekeeper's chores. Let's go back to that one.
This one?
The one before that one.
Okay.
Okay, this one just shows how the queen she's laying eggs. Even though it's January and February, she starts laying the eggs. And the bees are starting to venture out on the 50-degree and above days. And there's a bee, you can see him out here on the ledge, and there's snow in the background. So I would imagine that's still, even though there's snow, it's a warm, sunny day, so. Alright, now we can go on to the beekeeper chores. This is the time for constructing, painting, and repairing equipment. Most of the new catalogs from the beekeeping supply companies will be available in January. One thing about this, you see there's a traditional box painted white. But one of the things that I've read about online is that the bees like different colors or patterns on their beehive because it helps them to figure out which one is theirs when they're returning. So that's why you see a lot of people have different colors or different patterns or arrangements or designs. And there are some really pretty ones if you want to look at them online. So they're actually an art form.
Can I ask a question about that last slide?
Uh-huh.
What are the little spacers in between the boxes there?
These right here?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. That's a Kelly question.
Well, the red box looks like a queen excluder, like a wooden one. The wooden ones are thicker than the plastic. And then it could be that this box is uneven, the blue one, and they're evening it out type. But other than that, it looks like a queen excluder.
They're not trying to create airflow or anything.
Well, that's very possible. Most of the time, though, they'll have an actual entrance, though, because you don't want robbing into your brood box. So, but a lot of times you'll see like a top entrance, but it's positioned up higher. But yeah, and you'll find like not only in the U.S. but in different countries, beekeeping is done so differently. You really, and then of course their environment does a lot too, because people who have to deal with bears and animals getting into their hives will have a completely different setup than we might. I mean, I've not had any bear problems. So.
Can I make a comment? That looks like the summer, so it looks like a queen excluder. Now, if it was a little thicker, they do make spacer shims, like you could put, that wouldn't be a setup for the winter, but if you had a spacer shim, like if you need to feed patties or something, but that's not thick enough. Like you said, I think it's a queen excluder, but if it was a little bit thicker, they do make space, like little spacers. They make different thicknesses of them.
So you could just slide the patty in there without opening the hive up?
Well, you would still you'd have to angle the box and just slip the patty in there and angle it back down real quick, so you're not disturbing that much.
Yeah.
I think they do make. I mean, like you said, there's so much equipment out there, and all these companies to kind of put themselves first. They make their own little gadgets or widgets or stuff, and I've seen a spacer that has like a slide tray, I think, for a patty. So you put that spacer in there and it has like a drawer that you could pull out and push back in. There's all kinds of stuff out there to spend your money on.
Oh, I know.
And I'm mainly focused on traditional hives here in the U.S., the long stripe hives. But there are top bar hives, there's plastic hives, I have a flow hive. There's all different, there's skiffs, and there's all different types of hives. So, this is just a traditional long strop, which is what is generally used in America.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is some equipment that has been waiting to be repaired, and January and February is a really good time to do that because later on in the year, when things start rolling with the bees, you do not want to be caught, trying to repair your equipment when changes can occur so quickly in the summertime with your bees. So, repairing your equipment in January and February is essential. I learned that one the hard way. So, okay. Most of the supply companies send out new catalogs the beekeeping supplies in January and February, and your goal is to have your bees and all your equipment ready for making honey by mid-April. Old dark comb should be removed. Okay, there's some old dark comb. This is the back side of it. They've scraped it off. And that's the front side. I picked the yuckiest looking one I could find. So, all dark comb should be removed from the frames in storage. Do not install the foundation yet. It shouldn't be done before the frames go into the hive because the foundation will dry, crack, and be rejected by the bees if it's exposed to the air for a long time prior to going into the hive. Okay. If you are buying queens or packaged bees in the current year, in January or February, you should have that done by January and February at the latest. And I would actually say that probably needs to be like November or December, because I've ran into problems with, oh, we're done, we've got all our orders now, we can't take any more, but we can put you on the list. So. By March, many of the producers will be booked solid and not able to promise your shipment of bees before May. The availability of queens in packages depends partly on the winter weather in the southern states where they are produced. A relatively cold winter will delay the production of bees. There will be a few days in these months above 60 degrees. If possible, take a few minutes to look at your hives. If no bees are flying from the hive, you probably have lost it, or it's a very weak hive. Open it and take a look. When examining the hive in late winter, you will be concerned with several things. Are there signs of serious trachea mite infestation? It's normal for a few dead bees to be carried out of the hive on a warm day. But if there are many bees crawling and clustered on the ground, like you see here, look at this. In front of the hive, suspect trachea mites. They'll be unable to fly, and a few will have a K wing pattern. And this is the K wing pattern right here. It kind of looks like a K. If you see that, you've got trachea mites. Often problems can be diagnosed at Kentucky State University, who put out this packet. I forgot to mention that. Or the Kentucky Department of Agriculture from a sample of worker bees taken from a weak hive. Excuse me. See the KSU publications, the tracheal mite, a microscopic parasite of the honeybee, and preparing the mailing honeybee sample for the mite and disease diagnosis. Basically, you take the bees and you get a container and you scoop some out, and you can put them in a baggie or a container, and you'll ship them to Kentucky State University, and they'll run tests on them to see if you have tracheal mites. They're very tiny. There's a picture of one, and they get into the trachea of the bee. So there's a couple things that you can do to help with this. Let's see. That's for varroa mites. Those are both for varroa mites. These are treatments for varroa mites. Does the cluster of newly, okay, I'm going to stop here for a second. A couple of the things that I've read about that you can do for the trachea mites is you can use a smaller smaller foundation cell. there's a couple of drawbacks to that. You know, bigger cells produce bigger bees. Bigger bees can, of course, work more, carry more. You know, they make larger, more robust hives. They can produce more heat. They can cool it down easier. But smaller cells kind of cramp up the bees and produce smaller bees, and the tracheomite has a more difficult time getting into the esophagus or the trachea of the bee, from what I've read. Have you heard anything contrary?
I have not.
Okay. Another thing, let's see. And another thing that you can do is you can use grease patties, and you can put the grease patties on top of your hive, and the bees will get it all over them, and they'll clean themselves, and they'll get it in their throat. And the tracheomites don't like the grease patties. I think it smothers them, so that gets rid of them, or controls them, I should say. It controls them. So. Okay, when you're looking at your hive, does the cluster of bees, is it nearly as large as last fall? How many honey frames are left? The bees should still have frames with honey they stored from last year. You may add honey frames from other hives and that have more honey if necessary, but don't break the cluster of bees by placing frames of honey inside of it. So if your bees are still clustered, don't break the cluster. Don't break the cluster by placing frames on the outside. The bees will need to maintain their cluster through the remaining cold weather of late winter and early spring. Middle or late February is a good time to install the, how do you say that? Apodicin? Okay. And the checkmite strips for varroa mite control. By getting the strips in early, it's possible to leave them in for a full 8 weeks. The apiston, or 6 weeks for the checkmite, and then remove them well before the honey flow begins in late April. Mark your calendar so that you remember when the strips should be removed.
So, will that treatment affect the honey that's left in the hive?
Yes, those treatments will. There are some treatments that can be put on when you have honey, but the honey she's referring should be down in the brood box, and you don't take the brood box honey.
Okay.
You shouldn't have a honey super on at this point.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That comes a little bit later on, and you'll have a queen excluder to keep them, to keep the queen from laying eggs in that portion.
So basically in the wintertime, you get it down to just the brood box and that's pretty much it?
That's what I do. I mean, I'm sure there are maybe some beekeepers that, I don't know if they would keep a super, like a full super on, but normally it's just the brood box, and they keep the outer 2 to 3 of honey completely full, and that keeps them through the winter.
Right.
To me, I think it's anymore with all the pests we've got, that it's not a smart idea to leave too much extra equipment, because it leaves the way for the wax moth. You know, I've had or beetles and all this other stuff if they can't control it. So I mean, I've heard guys from old school, you know, when we didn't have as many problems years ago. Yeah, you know, leave extra equipment on top or whatever. But I don't think today anymore that's a good idea. You know, because it just they've got to guard that space. It's not good to keep a lot of extra space, and also keeps the heat condensed down. And
a lot of beekeepers will always have double brood too.
Yeah.
And then when you have a double brood, unless you can get them down to one for the winter, then you end up with an empty brood box basically at some point in the winter, and you'll flip them. But that's still, to Troy's point, it's just inviting mice and anything that can get in there, wax moths that can eat up your equipment.
Yeah, especially if you're using 2 brood. I have 2 brood. Anything above that is way more, you know, have super on top of 2 brood is way too much space.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
observations and ideas. This right here, before we go on, these are the varroa mites. And you see them on the bee right there. And, yeah, that gives me the heebie-jeebies too. So,
And then here's
this is an alternative, that I used. I put this in there. It's not mentioned in your packet, but, I use an insect fogger with 16 ounces of mineral oil and I believe it's 12 or 15 drops of the wintergreen. I don't have the information in front of me. But, and I fog them once every 3 weeks and it breaks the cycle of the varroa mites.
I
So
believe this recipe is on our website. I think you gave it to me.
Yes.
And it's under the do-it-yourself. So the wintergreen, the patty, well, they're not the,
Oh, no, this one doesn't require the patty. This is just the fogger and the mineral oil and the wintergreen. And this will do a lot of hives. It will do a lot of hives, but this is the size of the recipe that I was given, so I'm probably never gonna use that one bottle of mineral oil unless it spoils. So, I put the whole thing in my fogger, and you just fog it for about 5 to 10 seconds, just until you see it. You lift up the top cover, and just until you see the fog coming up through the brood, and that's it, you're done. So that quick, and you can do a lot of beehives in a very short period of time. Okay, take a look at the maple trees through the month of February. The maple flowers are drab, dark red, and bees collect yellow pollen from them. This is an indication of the first available food for bees, and that the end of winter is coming. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about January and February? No? Okay.
I would just say though that now is a good time. Different clubs have different workshops going on, different learning sessions like this, but I mean, there's all kinds of good education out there, and now's the time to get involved and sharpen your skills. Because once these guys start growing,
Right.
it's just sweating through it so you can get a break.
Okay, in March, what's happening inside the hive? March is a critical time for the bees. The bees will thrive or suffer depending on the weather and your management. Tracheal mites, starvation, and nosema disease are the main enemies at this time. So there's the varroa mites, and that's starvation. See how the bees are headed in? They were going in there trying to get something to eat, and didn't want to get too far away from the cluster, and if they don't have enough food, they'll starve and they'll die right there. And this is the nosema. You can see like the droppings from the bees. Basically, what it is the bees don't get a chance to expel their waste, and they hold it in, and it causes problems, as you can imagine. Yeah. Mainly diarrhea, bee diarrhea. So that's what it looks like.
Clarification.
Yeah.
So they won't go and hive.
No, they don't poop in the hive.
That's,
That's what he always says.
I think it has to be 50 or warmer for them to take a cleansing flight. Is that?
I don't, they come out and fly when it's 50, so I would assume that they will, you know, when it's 50, so they'll venture out. The bees are starting to rear more brood, but it's an erratic process. Dandelions and henbit appear as significant pollen and nectar sources. That's henbit? I didn't know that. So, and that's actually edible by people too, so.
Ew.
If you want to. Yeah. Let's see, a few warm days, the bees bring in the pollen and feed the larvae. Okay, see this one his little pollen baskets on his legs, and you can see a nice little clump of pollen there. And this guy's getting nectar out of the flower. And these guys, I think these are really cool. They're marching in one at a time, you know. So these guys are loaded. They're the ones I like. So, well, girls actually. Yeah. The queen increases her egg laying, and then a cold spell hits and the cluster contracts. Often some of the brood is left outside of the cluster and starves. The bees destroy this dead brood. Brood in the center of the cluster matures, and young worker bees emerge to join the colony. And this is just a picture of some of the different stages of the larvae of the eggs. And this is the progression until the bee emerges, a fully grown bee. So. Then the weather warms up and the queen resumes her egg laying. This cycle continues. Gradually, the young worker bees replace all of the old winter bees that were reared last year. The bees have consumed a lot of honey through the winter, but have not had a chance to make new honey, so the stores are low. This one has some a lot of larvae in here, and they're trying to feed the larvae. There's a little bit of pollen. You can see the pollen in here. And this bee is dragging out a dead one out of the hive. So.
I get a lot of questions at this time period where they see dead bees, and a new beekeeper will be like, I've got all these kind of dead bees, or they see, and it's because they're taking out the dead. You know, they do live longer during the winter months, but they have to keep that hive, so you see them bringing them out. Sometimes they, you know, if it gets cold, they leave them right on the edge, and it can be intense when you see that, but you just have to remember it's normal to clean it out.
So we have an observation hive at our business, and we had like 20 dead bees at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it was.
Probably at all times.
I've never seen that many bees at the bottom of a hive before.
Well, if you
No,
ever
this time of the year.
observe them killing the drones off,
Yeah.
that's intense.
That's
Really intense, but that's just the nature. So.
I think that's right about now too. So.
And I believe the queen needs pollen to really begin laying eggs. So that's like the first thing they bring in is pollen, and that's why you give them pollen patties in this time frame that you'll supplement because you'll increase her laying capacity. So if you ever hear someone say give them pollen patties, this is why. But keep in mind you're now adjusting their normal pattern. So you're falsely telling this queen to lay eggs, and you don't want it to all of a sudden she explodes and the season's not ready and kills them all off.
And there's
Just
not
like you
enough
were
honey
saying.
in the hive to support them.
Or enough to keep that brood pattern warm. They'll just die.
Brood rearing requires the bees to consume honey rapidly for two reasons. First, the hungry larvae demand a lot of food. Second, the brood cluster temperature must be raised to above 90 degrees. To reach that higher temperature, the worker bees eat honey and generate more heat by shivering with their flight muscles. So they're in there basically doing bee jumping jacks.
Yeah.
This is why starvation in March is a real danger. If you find a ball of dead bees in the comb, each with its head in a cell, that's a sure sign of starvation. The long period of confinement can take its toll on the buildup of tracheomites and nosema. Both tend to increase through the winter because the bees are confined and unable to fly frequently. So the confinement equals a sick bee. I think he's beyond sick though. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question about the trachea mites.
Yeah.
So, if you find out you have it, the treatment you said will it cure the ones that already have it, or will they eventually die from it, and just you have to depend on the newbies coming in for the hive to survive, or?
It doesn't completely wipe out if you use the grease patties, it doesn't completely wipe out the trachea mites. It helps to control it, but it will take your numbers down. So if you notice that you're having issues and you put the grease patties on there, then they'll get it in their throat and it'll cause the trachea mites to smother and they'll die. I don't know whether they digest them or, but it prevents them from continuing their life cycle, and then newbies are continually hatched, and so eventually your hive gets healthier from you helping along with the grease patties. So, is there anything?
The tracheal mite is not as big of a problem as the mites, the varroa mite. That's our biggest pest at this time. So, but I think maintenance and, you can't keep all pests out of here. I just opened mine up and, the hive beetles, and I use the beetle blasters and the swifters, and it's really up to the strength of the hive too. And they are now breeding bees that kill the mites. So they'll chase them down and kill them and bite off their legs, and they bleed out. So it's amazing. They are evolving to take care of themselves, but I think location is a big part of also. It's not just about pouring chemicals into your hive. It's, do you have them in a sunny spot to where, mites, beetles, they don't like sunlight. So you put them in a lot of direct sunlight, which bees love. It's little things like that. So I don't want us to tell everybody, you have to medicate and fumigate and do all this stuff, but there are times when you have to.
Right. And a strong hive can overcome a lot.
Yeah.
And, and speaking of some different pests that you're gonna see in there, the hive beetle, and I freaked out when I seen a roach in mine, and I was like,
I should have brought, I took off this clean excluder. There was this huge roach, and it's this big, and they had propolised it into the clean excluder.
yes!
I was like, no. It was amazing. They had just completely encased it. It was dead at that point, but
That's
I'm
awesome.
sure it was like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know what kind of roach was that. Most of the ones
it was a
are
harsh-
wood roaches that I see.
Yeah.
I don't know what that big of one, what kind that was, but
I still have it. I'm breaking this meeting.
Yeah.
It was like a hard shell.
mm,
I've seen actually a few of them, so maybe they're like common where I'm at, but it was disgusting.
yeah, I get a lot of the wood roaches.
Yeah.
They're kind of reddish, and you'll see them in the inner cover a lot of times, especially if you have older equipment or.
Well, that's another thing. A large hive will produce a lot of propolis, and a propolis they'll trap, especially the beetles. So like when you lift up your lid and you're doing an inspection, also you see like these beetles disperse. It's because you broke that seal. Like they had literally encased them in propolis, and of course they would eventually die. But when we go in to inspect, we release them. So I always try to smash them real quick.
Be
but-
ready.
Yeah.
Be ready with the hive tool.
We have the flying cockroaches where I live, and they're big.
Yeah, I'll bet you that's what because it
Probably,
yeah, those
they're
small-
huge. They're like scary.
Right. Okay. Vegetable shortening patties and menthol should go into the hive as a treatment for trachea mites. The shortening is particularly helpful because it works better than the menthol in cool weather. If you use aperture, which is formic acid, gel packs for varroa control, this is a good time to put them in the hives. Apistan or check mite strips should be installed if they are not installed in February. So they're just reminding you in the calendar that if you haven't already done it, do it now, so that you can get the most benefit out of it before you have to remove it. Cause you can't keep that stuff on there. Then the honey flow starts when you put the honey supers on. Let's see, if the bees are low on honey, feed with sugar syrup. And these are some examples. There's the recipe: a quart of water, 2 pounds of sugar. This is a front feeder. This is basically what I use. This is a top feeder. And this one right here is awesome, the sugar syrup in, because you don't have to go back into the hive. With my little jars, I have to go in a lot. You know, I have to go, basically with the binoculars, looking at my bees going, dang it. And these, you still have to go in, you have to disturb them, and I believe every time you open that top, you're letting heat out as well. So this is the,
But this is March, this is not winter, we're in the March, right,
Right.
on the calendar, so
Yes.
you'd be giving them liquid. In the winter, you don't give them liquid feed, you give them, patties, like a candy board or dry sugar.
right,
Just to be clear that this is a different time of the year for
Right.
feeding.
okay.
What's the fumigillin?
Oh, let's see. Oh, and for this, it would be highs of 60s or above for several days. The bees will not break their cluster to take the syrup during the cold weather. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I've seen a lot of people. I'm so thankful for the people that are not afraid to say, I made a mistake. I've seen a lot of people that have tried to feed the bees during the winter, thinking that they'll help them out, and they put the sugar syrup in there, and what they end up doing is they cause humidity additional humidity in the hive, and it molds. So, like I said, I'm very thankful for their mistakes, and I can hopefully learn from their mistakes, because those are the ones that are easier to learn from than making them yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Include Fumundali bee. Okay. You all can give it a shot if you want to. Mixed into the syrup to control nosema disease.
I didn't know that.
I didn't until I read it in here. I think there's a couple other things online that you can go and get. It's probably the same chemical.
I think you learn about treatments based on who your mentor is, because if your mentor doesn't treat a lot, you don't really hear these things. But then if somebody does, you're like, wow, you got all this, but it's all about what your bees needs.
Right. Nosema disease hurts the bee's ability to rear brood. A good start on brood rearing in springtime is essential for honey production or crop pollination later on. Remove the entrance reducers. This right here, that piece of wood right there with the little small hole in it, that's the entrance reducer. And when you take that out, they have that whole entire length of the front of the hive to come and go. That also allows them ventilation too when it gets warmer, and they can fan it and keep it cool. Or let's see. The bees will soon need more room to come and go. Be sure you have your empty frames, supers, and new foundations ready. And I just wanted to show you the different types of foundations real quick. This one here is a plastic foundation, I believe. It looks like it to me. This one is a wax foundation, but it's the full foundation, and this one right here is just a little strip that's affixed to the top, and this one, the bees will build it on down themselves. And I started out doing this one thinking I'm going to do everything natural, but when it gets hot weather, you have to be really, really careful with how you turn those, because you can drop, you know, your whole frame out of your frame. So real easy if you're not careful with this.
Portion isn't as heavy as the honey,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
they're
the honey's
probably
more
about the
solid.
same, yeah.
So, but that had a water source as well. But you want to be careful about that, because as I was looking for beehives next to water, I found a lot of flooded beehives. So you can't get it too close to a creek bank, so. But ideally, if nothing changes, that's perfect. Okay. Okay, these are some different styles of apiaries. I'm OCD. I like the straight line, so I like it, straight, and they've got it looks like they might have wood chips or gravel around it to help keep the weeds away from it. That drives me crazy, but a lot of people do that and they're very happy with it. This I love. I love the gravel. I have gravel under my beehives, and this one has a windbreak and also a little bit of break from the sun. This is okay as long as it's getting, enough sunlight, but, be careful about blocking out too much sunlight. They like sunlight. So, okay. The need for a windbreak will be most apparent in the winter and the spring. The hive should also have direct sunlight from the south and the east. Easy access by car and truck, also a plus if you plan on hauling good honey crop later in the spring. Look for bee forage. This is another windbreak. There's the one that I was talking about with the hay. That's probably what I'm going to do, but with large brown rolls, because we have our apiary in a horse pasture with a fence around it. So this one here is, they've planted some evergreen shrubs. They've left a nice space over there for expansion as well. I think that's pretty cool. And then this one right here, like Kelly was saying, they took insulated foam board, and I believe that's what that is, and they've built a nice windbreak to go around them.
It looks like they used hinges, but you could just use duct tape.
Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah.
just as, yeah.
Right.
The duct tape, you use a lot of duct tape.
Yes.
But duct tape fixes everything,
It
so.
does.
That's right.
The guy
Duct
was
tape
always-
and Jamie Weld.
Right.
So a lot of sunlight out of the south, facing the southeast. Okay, access by truck, and you see there this guy. I can't even imagine if he had to carry all this stuff. He would quit. I know he would. Okay, and these beehives. Look, this isn't
That is
beautiful.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I want a house there. So, but yeah, these have plenty to go out and forage nectar and pollen. Okay. Avoid apiary sites that may be bothered by livestock. A large animal can easily knock over a hive. My mentor told me from the beginning that I've got to have my hives in a fenced-in area away from the horses. And I'm so thankful for that. And I see a lot of beehives as I drive around in pastures, and occasionally you'll see one that's bit the dust. And yeah, thank goodness we don't have to deal with bears.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
We have bears
Do you?
in southern Grant County, yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
Can you keep them?
yeah.
We don't want them, but we're getting them. Yeah, we've seen multiple bears.
Oh my.
Like black bears?
Yeah.
Okay, this wasn't in the packet, but I think it's important to make sure that your bees have water as well. Early on in March, it's probably not going to be as much of a big deal because the ground's still going to be really good and wet, and they can get water from a lot of sources. But as the weather gets warmer in April and May and throughout the summer, especially in the later summer months, you're going to want to keep lots of water available for them because they use the water to keep the hive cool. And also, they take their wings, is that right? And they fan the honey to dry the water out of the honey. And and thicken it up. And basically, if you have too high of a water content in your honey, it'll crystallize.
Right, it doesn't go bad, it just crystallizes faster.
Okay. So there's a little device that you can buy. I have one. I haven't used it yet. I've just been relying on my mentor to say, "Yep, it's good." So.
Refractometer.
Yeah, that's it. Refractometer. So. Okay, April. So what's happening inside the hive? By April, the bees have made it over the hump. The problem they faced in March have not completely disappeared, but a healthy hive needs only a little nurturing now. Brood rearing should really increase through this month. If it does not, your hive has serious problems. As the warmer weather comes, look for many bees returning with pollen loads. Okay, this is a pretty good frame right there. I was trying to find one that was a little sparser, but that one's not too bad. The brood rearing has really increased in this one. I think that's actually for a later on in the year. But you see these guys, there's my favorite picture again, they're coming back, they're working their tail ends off, or girls. The stronger the hive will have a significant amount of drone brood. That's why I chose that one, in preparation for the mating season. I don't know if you guys can see it right here, but this lighter colored cells that are capped, that's the drone brood. And it looks like there's a lot of it in the corner and across the bottom and maybe up on that side. When I was looking at it on my computer, it looked like there was more up and down through here. So it may be a little harder to see and over here in this corner.
So if you picked out this frame and you had bullet shaped mixed in with the flat and they were spotty, what would be wrong with that? This is a great pattern, this would be perfect. But if they were mixed in and you had patches, what would you need to do? You're gonna have to requeen. Your queen is failing. The queen shouldn't be mixing the female and the male. The male should be just like that, kind of in a cluster on the bottom, and you should have a nice form. They're either all capped or you've got eggs all in the same place, but when you start to see it all mixed up, or you only have a little patch here, a little patch there, your queen is done. You have to get a new one. Or you need to check for cells that the colony might be already recognized it and they're going to do it for you. So, but this is that's a great frame. You pull one of those out and you're like,
Yeah, I was hoping for one a little more sparse for this time of the year, but that one I like.
yeah.
Maybe that's wishful thinking. Okay, beekeeper chores. In particular, keep an eye on the 5-day weather forecast. A week of cold rain could really hurt the brood rearing. Feed the bees if you see this coming and the hive does not have at least a frame or two of stored honey. Add a second deep hive body when the brood, pollen, and honey have nearly filled up the first body. This is the food right there and the weather forecast, so just keep an eye on that. Remember that can, your bees can really slow down, so.
Could you still use the front feeder at that time?
I use a front feeder because that's what I have.
Oh.
But if I had one of those, I'd use it. So, but basically, I'm not gonna upgrade because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my motto. So, this, let's see. This extra space will help reduce swarming. The loss of productive bees in a swarm is your main threat. In late spring. Remove the trachea mite treatments. This is in April. Oh, I put this one on there. Back up one slide. Oops. Okay, I put this one on there to show you, the directions said to add a second beat. So there's the second beat to add to allow more space to reduce the chance of swarming. And up there's your queen, and she's a good layer. It looks like she's doing pretty good up there. They look nice and strong. This one kind of looks a little bit overpopulated to me, right there. Looks like it's gonna need some help pretty quick, because they're gonna outgrow their space, so.
So, quick question. So this time of the year, in April or whatever, beginning of April, you had your first brood box from the winter, and the honey that they're eating is on the outside frames, I guess? And then now you're adding a second box to kind of increase production of more bees, and then your honey box on the top there?
Yeah, actually, this is just to show you the different parts, and I wanted to point out the second beat. You probably wouldn't add the honey super at this point in time, would you?
It really depends if you want a double brood or a single brood. If you're doing a single brood and your box looks like that, you better put some supers on
You're gonna lose
ASAP,
them.
and like two supers, then you check it, 2 supers. I mean, they're growing fast. But if you're gonna do a double brood and you have that, you might actually already be too late. They might be ready to swarm. But if you put a double brood on, now they've got room to fill that top one. And you're gonna have to wait for that second brood box to be filled out before you add supers. So it really depends. If it's a really strong hive, you could super pretty early. But if they're not like this and you want to get them super strong, you might do a double brood. It really, every beehive is different. So, but I like a single brood because it's less inspection time. And like right now I have 11 hives, and if I'm doing double brood inspections, it's a long time, and in the heat. So that's just my preference.
So when you inspect that brood box, do you take every frame out and look at it?
Yeah, I mean, the honey frames you don't have to really, you're just looking to see if they've got honey, but when you get to the middle, you're inspecting about 6 frames, I would say, for sure, and you're trying to find your queen, make sure she's in there.
And if you can't
Looking
find
at
her,
her.
you're looking for evidence that she's there.
Because she can be tricky.
Yeah.
She wants to hide from you. But yeah, you see eggs, and you're seeing them all in all the different stages, you're good to go. You don't need to even go further, if it all looks good. But new beekeepers, I don't know, I do take a little bit. I enjoy it, so I'm kind of out there for the experience, I'm definitely not in it for the honey production.
I wanna make sure there's nothing that's not supposed to be in the hive that's in there. Mice, which, they shouldn't be able to get in, but, they're pretty crafty.
So the bottom right picture, that almost happened to our observation hive. You can hardly even see the frames on one side, so that's probably why they're like, I'm getting out of this hive, I'm swarming. We had a fence on the other side of this hive. They had a big cluster on the other side.
Did you get the swarm?
Yeah, we actually have another one, Elizabethtown. Yeah, we put that
I
up there.
think with an observation, I would let it swarm.
Yeah.
Just to keep it at a smaller size, but then make sure I had a trap set that they always go to that trap.
Yeah, we had it swarmed 3 times
Yeah,
this year, which was great. And we caught all 3 of them, and they're all doing very well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very pleased with it. And I like to just leave it not disturb it as much as possible. I know I only partially cracked it one time just to clean out some bees out of the bottom. Other than that, I've never, since I stalled it last July until now, I've never opened it up, never taken it outside, left it alone, let them do their own thing, let them keep breaking. And I think it's good for the mites too, because they've had these multiple long breaks in brood pattern. Because I let them reproduce their own queen. I've never requeened it. Just let it go, and it's done real well. And then you talk about a lot of sun, they like a lot of sun and stuff like that. And a lot of times they say cover up the observation hive, but majority of my time, I forget to put the covers on at night or whatever, or mine stays exposed to light almost all the time, and they do just fine.
They're probably just used to it. They're
Yeah.
like, ah, he leaves light on.
One morning, my dad's manager, she came. She looked at the hive this one morning, and she was like, "Oh boy, the hive swarmed." He came in the house and he was like, "Who wants money for finding the swarm?"
And that's a good dad right there. Did you find it?
No, he actually did.
He paid himself.
Yeah, I found one with the weed eater one time. It's not good.
Yeah, no.
Remove the tracheomite treatments. Problem with tracheomites can continue even if you did put the treatments on in March. But as long as the hive is rearing brood, healthy bees will be replacing those with the tracheomites. Remove the rheumite treatments according to when they were installed in February or March. And let's see, that is this is an antibiotic for foul brood. Treat your hive with terramycin to prevent American foul brood or AFB disease. This is especially important if you have had problems with American foul brood in recent years or have purchased used equipment. Used equipment makes me nervous, and I know a lot of people do it, but it makes me really nervous because I've already had an incident in my little beekeeping time that just, sent shockwaves through me. I thought I was going to lose all of my brand new hives, but I didn't because the bees were strong. They were doing well, and they ended up, coming through it. I got some frames from a friend who had, I didn't actually see them in the hives, but I seen them in the garage the same day they were installed, wax moss. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to lose everything. But they were just fine. The hives were strong enough. They were able to take care of their problem themselves. And I did put out wax moth traps, which I'm sure that didn't hurt either. So the wax moth traps, do we have the instructions for that one?
I don't think so.
Okay, I can send it to you if you want to put it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. Go back to that one real quick. The one with the American foul brood. Okay, see how gnarly that one looks right there? I mean, and it smells as bad as it looks. If you get American foul brood, if you take like a matchstick, and that's what they're doing here, this is the tip of the matchstick right here, or a toothpick. They stuck it down in the cell and kind of stirred it around in one of the brood cells, and they pulled it out. If it's slimy like that, and it makes like a rope coming out, then that's a sure sign that you've got it. But if you've got it, you're probably going to smell it even before you open the hive. From
And
what I know,
I think this is like cautionary.
right.
Once you hit this stage, that's the picture, that's your end result.
Yeah.
So,
That's as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the only way, that's the only option. I believe some states even make sure that you burn your equipment, am I
I
right?
believe Kentucky requires that we contact the state association and your entire apiary has to be inspected and anything affected is burned, and then they have to notify within a so many mile radius. I mean, it's that awful.
Right. Right.
Ooh, let's get off this slide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Observations and ideas. Oh, whoops, I skipped.
But that is a lot more rare,
It is rare.
only because all the states have instituted state inspectors. That was their number one reason for having state inspectors was to tamp down the American foul brood, and they have really succeeded over the years here and narrowing it down. And then now the autoclave, the autoclave help with they could at least keep the boxes.
Well, I imagine, the Kentucky State University, right, in Frankfurt? Is that
Yeah,
right?
they have an autoclave. Actually, if you go to they plan on having it available to people at the state meeting that's coming up, November 8th and 9th,
Yeah.
that you can for free take your boxes there, and they'll put it in the autoclave. If you suspect your equipment might have some type of diseases or something like that, they'll sterilize that. But the wax frames, you can't do, because it's high heat, so you can't do anything with those. But
Right. Okay. If your number of brood decreases from what you had last year, and you've ruled out mites, nosema, or bad weather, then you need to look closely at your queen. Is she long and fat, or about as small as the worker bees? A good queen will be considerably longer than the worker bees once she has started laying eggs. Does she move all of her legs normally? Does she walk across the comb? Is she injured? An injured queen must be replaced. If she is shiny, small, and bald, she has been attacked by the workers who have chewed the hair from her. Such a queen must be replaced as soon as possible. So this is a queen cage right there. That's if you were to get a new queen, if you were to purchase one, this is one of the ways it can come. I've seen them in little plastic queen cages as well. You basically put this between the frames, and the workers, it has a little candy cork in it, and the workers will chew through the candy, and it takes them a while. And the time that it takes them to chew through that allows them to get acclimated to her scent, and so they kind of accept her that way. It doesn't always work, but it helps. You know, if you were to just poke a hole through that candy and turn her loose in there, she'd be a goner. She would be an intruder.
So if she, like you described, if she was bald and small and everything like that, and you found her, like, do you physically remove her or let them figure it out?
If you have a new queen, and you're going to and you're gonna put the new queen in, you have to take care of the old queen. You have to remove her.
Well, I'm saying, like, if you didn't have a new queen yet.
That's a Kelly question.
Well, they can go 24, maybe even 48 hours without a queen. So if you found and you knew you could get one within that time frame, you could find. And of course, no one talks about how you get rid of the queen. It's not this, everybody talks about you gotta get rid of her. No one really says what that is, and so it's you pinch her and kill her. And then, yes, you bring in your new one. And then, to Jamie's point, because she's in that cage, she has a different pheromone. So, but the bees, if they've been 24 to 48, the old queen's pheromones are gone. And it's 24 hours, they know they're without. And you put that new one in, you still want to give her time to acclimate and for them to want her. And then they release her on her own. But, yes, you...
So if she's failing, do you check and see if you have capped queens in your brood, or to let that take its place, or just go ahead and...
You could pinch her. Let's say you don't want to buy a queen. You could get rid of the failing queen, and within 24 to 48 hours, you should see queen cells. But you have to make sure they have eggs to make the queen. And you're basically creating an emergency situation.
Right.
Because if they couldn't tell she was failing, they're not prepared. So if you determine that and there's eggs, they can now create an emergency queen cell. But if you pinch her and there's none, you just seal her.
Yeah.
So you guys were talking about swarming before, does that mean that they've created another queen? So there's two
They're-
queens in that hive at one time?
No. If they're getting ready to swarm, they're very systematic about it. They determine that either one, they could be doing it for mites, like it could not even be that that queen's failing. It's maybe they're infested by bugs, some reason. They decide to have that happen. They go ahead and they create a lot of queen cells, 8 or more, and they'll be on the bottom because they're doing this intentionally, and they'll be on the bottom of the frame. And on the 8th day of those being capped, the old queen, and in that time frame, they're kind of starving the original queen because they're going to send her off. And then on that 8th day, she gathers up her crew, and half of them leave. And now they have 8, it's 16, right, on a queen? On that, in 8 days, a new queen is going to emerge. But they've given themselves all kinds of fail-safes, right? But the first one out, whether she's the best one or not, she'll go kill the other ones. So now, I always find it's a good opportunity if you want some queens, if you find that happening. And a lot of times they're not all on the same frame. You could take that frame and create a nuke with that, because a queen's going to emerge, give them a few more bees, and you have a nice, there's so many different scenarios, but a swarm is very systematic in their life cycle. So they're prepared, they've got a brand new queen, the swarm has the old queen, and they're both good to go. Did that answer your question?
I like this picture here because you can see all the workers are hanging around. They're right there. They're tending to her every need. Those are the nurse bees, and they're tending to her every need. To me, I think it'd be strange to have that many girls watching you all the time. So
She doesn't even feed herself.
yeah,
They feed her.
She doesn't clean herself. She doesn't feed herself. They take care of everything. They also take care of the drones in that way as well. But the worker bees, when they hatch, they're pretty much on their own. They come out and they're like hit the ground running. It's kind of like sink or swim. So, okay, observations and ideas. If you're pollinating strawberries, pears, cherries, or apples in April, a strong hive is much better than a weak one. Remember that bees collect pollen for brood rearing. A hive with 4 or 5 frames of uncapped brood will need and collect much more pollen than a weak hive with only 1 frame of brood. The pollen foragers are the ones that are best at transferring the pollen from one blossom to another. The essence of pollination. We covered that a little bit in our last class about the importance of bees. So, okay. Now we're into May. What's happening inside the hive? In May and June, it's starting to get good now. In May and June, you and the bees are rewarded or disappointed by how well you prepared for the honey flow. You may also be busy keeping up with your bees. Serious beekeepers do not take long vacations in May. If your bees are healthy, everything happens this month. The hive is full of young bees. The weather is almost perfect. The honey plants are blooming everywhere. The queen is laying eggs day and night, often over 1,000 daily. And this picture didn't turn out that great, but when I blew it up, the little grains of rice on the eggs, and there's a lot of them. There are now enough bees to take care of all the brood. The hive is making honey very quickly, even several pounds daily. If the bees need to make wax, they will do this quickly by building onto the foundation on your frames or by filling in empty spaces with broccoli. Drone production increases greatly, and many drones fly out on sunny afternoons in search of mating areas. Swarming becomes a very, very important factor. Okay, that's a swarm. This swarm, I should have put them in better order. These guys are getting ready to go. These guys are gone. And these guys have landed, girls. And this is is actually the queen cells that they've made that Kelly was talking about earlier.
That's what you'll see. They look like peanuts.
They really do.
And that's when they are preparing to swarm. If they're emergency, they're more like in the center of the comb. They're not hanging like this. That's how you can tell the difference.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. May is the ideal time for a colony to reproduce, and most colonies will reproduce swarm cells or queen cells that will mature in time for swarms to issue from the hive. There are 3 reasons to keep your bees from swarming. Number 1, your hive will be weakened and the potential for honey production is much less. Number 2, your queen will be replaced by a daughter queen, which may or may not be as good as the original. And number 3, your swarming bees can be a nuisance to neighbors. Yeah. I caught, let's see, I caught 4 hives this year. 3 of them stayed, and 1 of them left in the middle of the night, packed up their stuff and left. No, just kidding. But they left. And the 3 hives that I caught were out in an apartment building. And one lady called me, and I got the message while I was in church. Please come now. There's bees everywhere. You gotta do something. And I was like, okay. They hadn't landed yet, so that was kind of fortunate because I could see where they landed, and it was really cool. Then I put a swarm trap out there and caught the other ones the easy way. So.
Let me ask this, you guys keep saying the swarm trap, what exactly is a swarm trap?
We're gonna cover that.
Oh,
I've got a slide just for different types of swarm traps. So
Okay.
we're gonna cover that one here in a little bit. I think it's probably one of the next couple of slides.
I would say it's a chore coming up. I'm gonna go ahead and get to here.
The possibility of trachea mites and noseema problems during May is very low. Only the very weakest hives are still fighting them. Varroa mites should be at very low levels, but be aware that they are starting to increase now that the treatments are out of there. So once you take the treatments out, it starts to build back up. But you're going to be pretty good for May if you did it when you were supposed to. Okay, beekeeper chores. Check your hives weekly and add supers as needed. Again, I added another diagram so you could see which one was the super. And the beekeeper is checking his hives weekly. And this wasn't in there, but these are logs, I think every beekeeper should do this, whether they do or not. I think they should, because even if they don't benefit from the information, which I